Today, we are looking at the explosion of child influencers.
Good.
Family vlogging and, well, the brand new laws that are basically desperately trying to police it all right now.
Right.
And to understand how structurally broken this entire system is, I want you to imagine something. Imagine building this, like, state-of-the-art, impenetrable bank vault, right?
Okay.
And it's specifically designed to protect a child's weekly allowance.
Hmm.
But while you're meticulously constructing this vault, you're simultaneously ripping the front door off their house and, broadcasting their most personal, private diary entries to millions of complete strangers.
That's a striking visual. And it's accurate.
Right.
Because we're currently looking at a legal and cultural system that is just incredibly fixated on protecting the future financial assets of minors.
Right. The allowance.
Exactly, the allowance. Yet that same system completely ignores the psychological and emotional cost of how those assets were generated in the first place.
Yeah. Well, welcome to today's custom-curated deep dive. We have a really fascinating and, frankly, a pretty heavy stack of sources to get through today for our listener.
We do.
We're unpacking a pretty blistering investigative article draft. It's titled, The Trust Fund Arrives at 18.
Great title.
Yeah. And that's alongside a forensic dossier, a thematic report, and several social media threads that essentially track a very specific century-long pattern of exploitation.
Yeah, and our mission today is to decode a framework the sources call the architecture of silence.
Right.
We're going to examine why the recent controversies you see on your feed,
Oh, yeah.
specifically like the massive 2026 Della vlog scandal, are actually running on the exact same structural mechanism as a 1920s black market baby ring.
Which is wild to me.
It is wild.
Yeah.
And we're also going to break down why the new laws being passed right now, which are, supposedly meant to fix this problem, are just entirely missing the point.
Yeah, so I followed the Della vlog's backlash in real time online. Like, I saw the tweets.
Yeah.
But reading through this dossier completely changed how I view what was actually happening there.
It shifts the perspective completely.
It really does. So let's start there, just to kind of get our bearings in 2026. For those who aren't familiar, Dallin and Bella Lambert, who are known on YouTube as Della Vlogs, they run this channel with over 4 million subscribers.
Cool point one, 4 million.
Huge audience. And they built this massive, really dedicated audience, largely around a highly emotional narrative. It was an infertility journey that eventually shifted into adoption. So they adopted their daughter, Story Bell, in July 2023. And then they announced a second daughter, Rennie, in December 2025.
Which brings us to the real catalyst for our current discussion. January 2026, the Dubai trip.
Right. So in January 2026, the couple flew to Dubai to meet the massive YouTuber MrBeast.
Yeah.
And the detail that really just ignited the internet was that they left their newly adopted baby back in the U.S. And while they were in Dubai, they posted a sponsored advertisement for a baby carrier.
Which is just...
I know, the video was actually filmed beforehand in their apartment.
Right, yeah.
But they posted it from their Dubai hotel room. So the internet backlash was just swift and brutal. I mean, people were pointing out the immense disconnect of a family brand that is built entirely on a child's story, but it's running on autopilot, churning out sponsored content for baby products even when the child isn't even on the same continent.
Yeah, and the backlash focused really intensely on their parenting choices.
Yeah.
Right? Like the morality of leaving a newborn to go network.
Right, exactly.
But the sources point us to a deeper structural mechanism at work here. What's fascinating here is what we're really witnessing is total adult control over the disclosure of a dependent's life.
Yeah.
The child's actual presence isn't even necessary for the monetization machine to keep running.
Which is kind of terrifying.
It is. And the timeline shows us it didn't stop with the Dubai trip. It escalated.
It escalated dramatically. So fast forward to the spring of 2026.
The Lamberts post a video titled, "Our Adoption Was a Scam."
Wow.
Yeah. And this video absolutely explodes. Like, it trends in YouTube's top 5.
Of course it does.
Right. And in the video, they alleged that a birth mother they had connected with online, who was reportedly expecting twins, had lied to them and other prospective families.
So let's look past the sheer drama of those specific claims for a second and focus on what is happening mechanically.
Okay.
The adults are controlling the public disclosure of a failed adoption attempt. They are actively monetizing the story of a severe emotional trauma before any child is even placed in their home.
Wow, yeah.
The mechanism of exploitation here has evolved to the point where it doesn't even require a child in the frame.
Yep.
It just requires an adult with an audience and a highly emotional origin story to, package and sell.
That part was so unsettling to read. I mean, I saw all the outrage on social media, all the trending response videos. But what I couldn't understand while reading this dossier is, like, why are there no guardrails? Yeah.
How is it perfectly legal to monetize someone else's origin story or some vulnerable birth mother's alleged deception to millions of people? Like, hasn't anyone tried to stop this?
Well, to answer that, the sources argue we actually have to look backward.
Okay.
We can't understand 2026 without looking at how the legislative foundation for this exact type of exploitation was poured, well, over 70 years ago.
70 years.
Yeah, the framework for this lack of regulation was built in Memphis, Tennessee in the 1920s.
Okay, so when the report pointed to the 1920s, I was completely thrown off.
Yeah, it seems like a stretch at first.
Totally. I was thinking, what does a black market baby ring in Memphis have to do with YouTube vloggers?
Right.
But then I read the statistics. So from the 1920s until 1950, a woman named Georgia Tann ran the Tennessee Children's Home Society. An estimated 5,000 children passed through her hands.
5,000. It was an industrial scale operation.
It really was.
She targeted vulnerable populations, coercing mothers who were often poor or unmarried into surrendering their infants. And in some of the most harrowing documented cases, she actually told women their newborns had died. When in reality, she had stolen the infants to sell them to wealthy, out-of-state families.
And she was skimming up to 90% of the adoption fees on these placements.
90%.
Yeah. She maintained secret bank accounts, completely falsified the children's background records, and she was entirely enabled by the justice system.
That's the crazy part.
Right. Judge Camille Kelley, who presided over the local juvenile court, was just rubber stamping hundreds of these placements without following state law. Tann basically operated with impunity for 30 years before a state investigation finally looked into it.
And the aftermath of that investigation is really where we find the blueprint for today.
Okay, how so?
Well, when the scandal finally broke and Georgia Tann's operation was exposed, the state of Tennessee was forced to act. So they passed reform legislation in 1951. However, lawmakers were faced with a huge dilemma. They had thousands of children placed in wealthy, prominent families across the country under fraudulent circumstances.
Oh, wow.
So opening the records to help the victims would expose those families and the state to massive legal and social fallout.
So the 1951 legislation didn't open the adoption records to help the victims find their real families.
No, it didn't.
It permanently sealed them.
Permanently.
The lawmakers claimed they were, protecting the children from the quote-unquote stigma of illegitimacy. But really, they were protecting the wealthy adoptive parents and the complicit judges from liability.
Exactly. And that is the cornerstone of what the thematic report calls the architecture of silence.
The architecture of silence.
Yes. The state-level exposure of a massive fraud did not produce transparency. It produced a permanent disclosure barrier for the very people the fraud had been committed against. The institutional response repaired the liability of the system. It protected the adults. It did absolutely nothing to repair the children whose origin stories had been stolen, altered, and sold.
It's like finding out a massive corporation is cooking the books.
Right.
And the government's grand solution is to just make it illegal for anyone to ever look at the bookkeeping again.
That's a perfect analogy.
It's so backwards. So the mechanism is established, right? Adults control the story, they profit from the transaction, and when things go terribly wrong, the adults pass laws to protect the institution.
Yes.
They basically legalize the cover-up, completely ignoring the consent or the rights of the child.
The dependent's autonomy is sacrificed to maintain the system's stability. And that mechanism didn't just disappear when society modernized, It just adapted to new technology.
Okay, so the 1951 law protected the brick-and-mortar institution.
Right.
But how does a sealed record in a courthouse turn into a monetized vlog in 2026? The dossier highlights two key milestones that bridge that gap. And the first one is the 2001 Wecker or Killshaw case, better known as the Internet Twins.
Yeah, this was a massive transatlantic scandal.
Yeah.
It really tested the limits of early Internet commerce.
It caused an international incident.
It did.
Like, Tony Blair even spoke out from Downing Street about it, calling it deplorable.
Yeah.
So, just to summarize, Tranda Wecker, a mother in Missouri, placed her infant twin daughters for adoption through an internet broker called A Caring Heart. A couple in California paid about $6,000 and took the girls home. But 8 weeks later, Wecker lured the California couple into a final visit, essentially kidnapped the twins back, and sold them again.
Unbelievable.
I know. This time, she sold them to a couple from Wales, the Killshaws, for roughly $12,000, or I guess about 8,200 pounds.
And they completed this highly rushed, pseudo-legal adoption in Arkansas.
Why Arkansas?
Well, at the time, Arkansas permitted adoptions in as little as 10 days, which basically made it a haven for this kind of jurisdiction shopping.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So once the paperwork was rushed through, they flew the twins out of the U.S.
The detail that really stuck with me here was what happened to the children's identities during all of this. Like, they were 6 months old and they were renamed twice in under a year.
Yeah.
They went from Kiara and Kiara to Kimberly and Belinda to their eventual names. And all of these were chosen by adults who had known them for mere weeks.
It really highlights how the children were treated entirely as property.
Yeah.
And when the authorities finally intervened, look at what the quote-unquote fix was. The Arkansas court voided the adoption based on residency requirements. The authorities shut down the broker, the Caring Heart.
Right. They addressed the jurisdiction shopping and the licensing. But again, nobody ever asked what the kids needed for their own long-term autonomy.
Because the institutional response once again viewed the crisis through an adult lens. It addressed the legality of the transaction. It fixed a specific, embarrassing failure mode for the courts. But there was no framework built to give those children any future control over how their highly publicized origin story was disclosed to the world.
Yeah.
The transaction simply moved from a courthouse in Memphis to a dial-up internet broker, but the dependents' total lack of consent remained identical.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the next major shift. In the Wecker case, the internet was just the tool to facilitate the physical placement of the child. But in the next milestone, the internet story itself becomes the product.
Exactly. We're talking about the Stauffer family case in 2020. This is the moment the monetization of the origin story becomes the primary industry.
Yeah. And when I first read the Stauffer section in the dossier, I have to admit, I just thought, these are terrible people.
That's the natural reaction.
Right. Like YouTube vloggers Masaika and James Stauffer adopted a 2.5-year-old boy, Huxley, from China in 2017. They built roughly 30 videos around this process across channels with over 1 million subscribers.
Wow.
They monetized his adoption, his severe medical needs, his face, from before the adoption was even finalized.
Right.
Then, in May 2020, they post a monetized video announcing they have, quote-unquote, rehomed him.
Yeah.
He was 4.5 years old. They placed him with a different family, claiming they weren't fully informed of his special needs. Micah Stauffer actually said in the video, quote, "Do I feel like a failure as a mom? 500%.
And the internet backlash there was monumental.
Huge.
And understandably, it focused very heavily on the parent's character. But if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Okay.
the thematic report specifically warns that focusing just on their character is missing the underlying mechanism. If we just label them as bad actors, we miss how the system actually functions.
See, I struggled with that part initially. Like, if it's not about them being bad parents, what is the system actually doing?
Okay, so the report introduces a concept called the fifth dimensional split.
The fifth dimensional split.
Yeah. This is the stark divide between a child's authorized identity and their experienced identity.
Interesting.
So the authorized identity is the public, monetized, carefully curated avatar that the adults produce and profit from.
Got it.
It's the inspiring adoption journey that gets millions of views. The experienced identity, on the other hand, is what actually happens to the child behind closed doors, completely on the adult's terms.
So Huxley's authorized identity was this, like, highly profitable narrative of a family coming together.
Right.
But his experienced identity was being placed in a foreign home, filmed constantly for content, and then legally removed when the reality of his medical needs didn't match that authorized narrative.
Exactly. And the crucial, horrifying point is that both of those identities, the public avatar and the private reality, are controlled by the exact same adults.
Yeah.
The child has absolutely zero capacity to consent to his origin story becoming public. Nor does he have any say in how the ending is narrated.
Right. He didn't have a YouTube channel to tell his side of the story.
Exactly. The announcement of his removal was framed entirely around how the parents felt. You know, do I feel like a failure? 500%. And they controlled and monetized that narrative too.
It's the exact same mechanism from Georgia Tann in the 1920s.
Yeah.
The adults control the story, they profit from the disclosure, and the child has zero agency.
Exactly.
Which is what brings me right back to my original frustration with Della vlogs. People are recognizing how toxic this is.
Yeah, they are.
And lawmakers are writing laws right now in 2026. Like, when I was looking at the new Tennessee law, I actually thought it was a huge win. I mean, it passed 92-0 in the state house, right?
It did, yeah.
I was cheering for it until I read the thematic report, which basically calls these new laws a lie.
They are a lie because of what they are actually designed to protect.
Okay.
Since 2024, we've seen a wave of legislation across California, Arkansas, Montana, Utah, Virginia, and Hawaii, all addressing child influencers. But let's look closely at Tennessee's brand new law.
Okay, SB 4.69.
Right, which goes into effect July 1st, 2026.
So the core rule of SB 1469 is, if a minor appears in at least 30% of a creator's monetized content over a 30-day period, that creator has to set aside a share of the earnings into a trust fund that the child can access when they turn 18. And Arizona has a very similar bill, HB 2192, moving through right now, largely driven by the wake of the Della vlog scandal.
Right. And on the surface, a trust fund sounds like a hard-won protection.
It does.
But the sources argue it is deeply infected with what the framework calls non-adoptee bias.
Okay, yeah, I saw non-adoptee bias in the report, and I was trying to wrap my head around it. Does that basically mean the lawmakers are only looking at this from an adult's perspective, like treating it like a traditional labor dispute?
That is exactly how it manifests.
Right.
Lawmakers are treating family vlogging the same way they treat child actors in Hollywood. If a child acts in a movie, they are performing a fictional character, and the harm is unpaid labor.
Right.
So you mandate a trust fund, like the Coogan laws in California. But vlog children are not playing a character, they are playing themselves.
Yes.
Their actual medical history, their adoption trauma, their daily meltdowns, that is the product.
Oh, wow. So by treating it purely as a labor issue, the legislation entirely focuses on protecting revenue, not disclosure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think back to the title of the investigative article draft we started with.
Right. The trust fund arrives at 18.
The disclosure started at 2.5.
Wow.
A child covered by Tennessee's new law is guaranteed a payout when they become a legal adult.
Right.
But they were never guaranteed the right to say no to the video being filmed when they were a toddler.
Right.
The law addresses the money generated by the exploitation, but it completely ignores the consent required to make the story public in the first place.
So what does this all mean? It means society is essentially treating a child's privacy, their very origin story, like a toll road.
A toll road, yes.
You are legally allowed to drive all over it. You can broadcast their medical history to millions. You can monetize their adoption trauma as long as you pay the toll into a trust fund that they get years later.
It is a brutally accurate analogy. Every reform across this century, sealing Georgia Tann's records to protect the wealthy, shutting down the internet broker in the Wecker case to fix the court's embarrassment,
right,
and now mandating these child influencer trust funds. They have all closed the gap between the money and the moment of the scandal, but they have never once closed the gap between the disclosure itself and the person the disclosure was made about.
Because the fix is always about regulating the transaction.
Exactly.
It's never about protecting consent. Even the Arizona bill that was moving while the Della vlogs controversy was happening, if it passes, it does absolutely nothing about the fact that a birth mother's story or a failed placement has already been turned into a trending YouTube video.
Right.
It just says, hey, if you make money off this trauma, make sure you put some in a bank account.
Which raises an important question, framed in the sources as the post-tragic turn. We've named the mechanism. We see it clearly repeating over a century, adapting from paper to the internet. So what would a real functioning reform actually look like?
Well, according to the framework, a real reform would give the dependent, the child, a structural decision point over the disclosure itself. At an age when that disclosure actually means something to them, not just a financial payout at 18 for a story that was already told to 4 million people when they were in diapers.
Exactly. A law that protects consent, not just revenue. And as the sources boldly state, that law has not yet been written.
Hasn't.
The architecture of silence remains fully intact.
And that really brings it back to us, the listeners. Like, why should we care about the intricacies of Tennessee SB 1469 or a 1950s baby wing?
Right.
Because we are the audience. We are the ones clicking on the adoption. Our adoption was a scam videos.
Yeah.
We fuel the attention economy that makes this structure so incredibly profitable. The mechanism only works because there are millions of us watching.
Or the other half of the transaction.
Yeah.
The adults supply the story, but the audience supplies the revenue that these new laws are so desperate to regulate. Without the audience, there is no authorized identity to monetize.
And it leaves me with this massive, just looming thought. We know that right now in 2026, if an adult influencer has a bad digital footprint, like an old tweet or an embarrassing video, it can ruin their career today.
Oh, instantly.
The internet is forever. So what happens in 10 years? What happens when this first generation of quote-unquote content babies, these kids whose most vulnerable moments, their behavioral diagnoses, their adoption traumas, were broadcast and monetized before they could even form a sentence?
Right.
What happens when they turn 18?
When the mandated trust fund finally arrives in their bank account.
Exactly. Will they just quietly take the money and accept that their entire childhood was public property?
I doubt it.
Or will they look at the adults in the room and say, this wasn't enough? Are they going to sue their parents? Or, and this is the really provocative part, will they start looking higher up the chain? Will they start suing the massive tech platforms like YouTube for hosting and profiting from the unauthorized, non-consensual disclosure of their entire lives?
It is a very real possibility. I mean, when you realize the scale of the profit generated by these origin stories, it's hard to imagine the subjects of those stories won't eventually demand accountability from the platforms that facilitated and algorithmically rewarded it.
Which makes you wonder, are the massive tech platforms destined to become the modern-day equivalents of Judge Camille Kelley?
Just rubber stamping it.
Just blindly rubber stamping the exploitation, taking their cut of the ad revenue, and refusing to look at the human cost until a massive legal scandal forces them to.
It's a really sobering comparison. And until a law is written that addresses human consent rather than just financial liability, the mechanism will just keep running.
Definitely something to seriously think about next time a highly emotional, deeply personal family vlog pops up in your recommended feed. Remember the bank vault. They are building a state-of-the-art system to save the allowance, but they have completely ripped the front door off the house to do it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the content you consume, and we will see you next time.